Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit this subscribe button, so you never miss a story like this. And also comments where you are watching from, how many sons and daughters you have. Thanks. You can't just take my property, I shouted, storming down the porch steps barefoot, heart pounding as I saw her smug face halfway down my lawn. She didn't even flinch. Karen, yes, that Karen, was holding my wind chimes like they were a diseased animal, pinched between two fingers like their joyful sound personally offended her soul. Her blonde bob didn't move an inch, even with the breeze blowing harder by the second, like the sky itself was on my side. Actually, I can. It's a violation of HOA rules, she snapped, her voice dripping with fake politeness. Noise pollution is taken very seriously here. This isn't a flea market in Tijuana. It's Rosewood Estates. I could feel the burn in my chest as she turned away, fully intending to walk off with what she'd just stolen. I'd had those wind chimes since my mother passed, she gave them to me. They were hand-carved, tuned perfectly. Every note reminded me of Sunday mornings and peace and the woman who raised me. But this woman? This petty tyrant with her clipboard and her need for control? She didn't care about that. You take one more step with those, I growled, my voice low now, steady in a way that even surprised me, and I'll call the police for theft. She turned slowly, the smirk on her face curdling into something nastier. Theft? Really? Oh, sweetie. Don't embarrass yourself. You signed the HOA agreement like everyone else when you moved in. It clearly states that all external decorative items must be approved by the board. And guess who's the board? I clenched my fists, my jaw twitching as I fought to stay calm. My 6-year-old daughter, Lily, peeked through the front window, her tiny hands pressed against the glass. I saw her face, confused and scared, and something inside me snapped. No, Karen. I didn't move here to be bullied by a wannabe dictator in heels and a name badge. You could have sent a notice, filed a complaint. But instead, you crept onto my property like a thief and snatched something that wasn't yours. That's not enforcing rules. That's control. Karen's eyes narrowed. You think you're better than everyone else just because you painted your fence that ridiculous turquoise color. You think your daughter's laughter makes this street better? Let me remind you, people move to gated communities to get away from chaos. From noise. From people like you. There it was. People like you. That final, ugly truth hiding underneath all her faux smiles and tight blazers. I stepped closer, daring her to flinch. You mean single moms? Working class? Women who didn't marry into HOA royalty? She hesitated, just for a split second, then raised the wind chimes like a weapon, shaking them so they clattered awkwardly. This isn't a daycare, Madison. Maybe if you put half as much effort into following community guidelines as you do hanging up junk, we wouldn't have to have this little chat. I took a deep breath, then turned my back, not because I was done, but because I wasn't going to let her see me lose it. I walked up the steps, picked up my phone, and without hesitation, dialed 911. That made her pause. You wouldn't. I looked her dead in the eye. Watch me. She scoffed, tried to play it cool, but I could see the shake in her hand now. Her bluff had been called. I didn't care if it was just wind chimes or if she thought the police would laugh. To me, this was about principle. You don't take what doesn't belong to you. You don't silence joy because your own life is too bitter to handle it. Behind me, Lily had opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. Mommy, why is that lady yelling? I didn't answer. Karen's face faltered. Her eyes shifted to Lily, and for a flicker of a second, I thought maybe she'd remember what it meant to be human. But no. You're setting a terrible example, Karen said, voice clipped. I laughed. Actually laughed. Oh no, Karen. The terrible example is stealing from a grieving woman in front of her child. That's what she'll remember. Karen scoffed, then turned abruptly and tossed the wind chimes onto my grass like they were trash, dusting her hands off as if she'd just finished scrubbing filth off her soul. There. Keep your tacky little noisemaker. But don't say I didn't warn you when the board votes to fine you. She stalked away, heels clicking like gunfire down the pavement. I watched her go, my body trembling, my palms sweaty, but my spine straighter than it had ever been. I looked down at the wind chimes lying in the grass. One of the cords had snapped in her grip, the butterfly charm my mom had added was bent. But I knelt, picked them up with care, and held them close. Lily walked over, slipping her hand into mine. Are they broken? Not broken, baby, I said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Just a little bruised. But they're going back up. Right where they belong. Because this wasn't just about wind chimes anymore. This was about standing up. Not just for sound, or color, or joy, but for people who've been made to feel small. For people who are told to shrink their lives to fit someone else's comfort. Karen didn't know it yet, but this was war. And I wasn't backing down. You'd think after that showdown, Karen would back off. That maybe, just maybe, a dose of embarrassment, a cracked wind chime, and a threat of police would have been enough to make her crawl back to her beige house and lick her wounds. But no. Not Karen. The very next morning, I woke up to an official-looking envelope shoved under my front door. No stamp. No return address. Just that smug Rosewood Estates HOA letterhead at the top, printed like it was some kind of sacred scroll. Violation notice, decorative noise apparatus, second warning. Second? There hadn't been a first. Unless you count Karen showing up on my lawn with the attitude of a judge and jury. And now, she wasn't just threatening. She was documenting. I stood in my kitchen holding that letter like it was radioactive. My coffee sat untouched on the counter. Lily was eating cereal at the table, humming, off-key and joyfully, to the very wind chimes that now hung proudly again on the front porch, only slightly bent. I should have been scared. I should have been cautious. But instead? I felt something rising in me. Something hot. Something tired. Because this wasn't about wind chimes. It wasn't even about rules. This was about control. Karen saw me, a single mom, new to the block, not part of her wine-night inner circle, and she decided I didn't belong. She couldn't kick me out, so she'd chip away instead. One petty notice at a time. So I made a decision right then, holding that letter. If she wanted to play games, she'd chosen the wrong opponent. That night, I showed up to the HOA meeting. Not in jeans and a t-shirt like I usually wore. No, I came in with purpose. Black slacks, a crisp blouse, my hair up. Professional. Clean. Present. Like someone who knew what she was doing, even if inside, I was shaking. The clubhouse was filled with folding chairs, bad coffee, and even worse energy. Karen sat at the front like she was running for president, flanked by two other board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She saw me enter and gave the fakest smile I'd ever witnessed. "Oh. Madison," she said, loud enough for the whole room. "How lovely of you to join. I was just about to bring up the ongoing issue with your ornaments." The room turned to look. Neighbors, some familiar, some not, stared like I was the main attraction at a circus they hadn't paid to see. I smiled. But not because I felt like it. Because I was done being intimidated. "Great. Let's talk about it," I said, walking right up to the front and holding up the letter. This ridiculous piece of paper was slipped under my door. No signature. No citation. Just a made-up violation. Karen blinked. "It's not made up. Section 14C, Line 3. No external noise-making decor shall be displayed without board approval. It's clearly stated." I cut her off. "Actually, I read the HOA charter last night. All 24 pages. There is no line 3 under 14C. There isn't even a 14C. What you're quoting doesn't exist." She froze. That's when I knew she hadn't expected me to check. She thought I'd crumble under paperwork and big words. I turned to the room. And even if it did exist, let's say for argument's sake it did, I'd like to ask the board to explain the discrepancy in enforcement. Because my neighbor across the street has a singing frog statue that plays La Cucaracha every time someone walks by. And Mr. Harris on the corner? He's got a whole windmill. I don't see them getting letters. Silence. One of the board members, a tired-looking man named Greg, who always wore socks with sandals, finally cleared his throat. She's got a point, he muttered. Karen whipped her head toward him like she'd just been slapped. Greg. No, Karen, I said, stepping forward. Let's talk about what this really is. You don't like me. You don't like my daughter's laugh, my wind chimes, or the fact that I don't fit into your bland, boring, country club fantasy of what this neighborhood should look like. That's absurd. Is it? I leaned forward, dropping the notice onto the table. Then explain why you trespassed onto my property without notice. Why you yanked a sentimental item, a gift from my late mother, off my porch and tried to walk away with it. That's not a rule. That's harassment. People murmured. Karen's face started to flush. Let me be clear, I said, voice rising. I am not moving. I am not removing my chimes. And if another fake notice appears on my doorstep again, I will pursue legal action. Karen opened her mouth, but for once, no words came out. I walked back to my seat. And for the first time since moving into Rosewood Estates, I felt seen. The meeting adjourned 10 minutes later, awkward and quiet. Karen didn't say goodbye. But 3 different neighbors came up to me afterward. One of them even said, "Good for you." Another added, "She's been doing this for years." That night, I tucked Lily in and sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The wind was soft. The chimes sang. And I smiled. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to lose quietly. And the next move? Would be hers. I thought the HOA meeting would be the peak, the final clash, the last storm. I was wrong. Because Karen wasn't just angry now. She was embarrassed. And people like her, the ones who live off control, who thrive on power, they don't forget humiliation. They repay it. I woke up 2 mornings later to a bright orange sticker slapped across my mailbox. Notice, unapproved modifications. Pending municipal review. Municipal? I stared at it, stunned. This wasn't from the HOA. This was city code enforcement. I looked around the neighborhood, no one else had one. Not a single sticker on another home. Just mine. I peeled it off with shaking hands and marched inside. The notice came with a number, and I called it, still in my pajamas, heart thumping. A man named Harold answered. Sounded like he'd rather be fishing. Yeah, ma'am. Says here your address was flagged by the Homeowners Association for potential code violations. Decorative structures, exterior modifications, non-permitted fixtures. Fixtures? I cut in. What are you talking about? I haven't added anything. Just a small wind chime on my porch, and it's been there for years, longer than I've even lived here. Well, I'll have to come out and inspect. If there's a violation, you could be fined. Fined. Fined, because some woman didn't like the sound of joy outside her house. I hung up, hands trembling, not with fear, but fury. Karen had gone nuclear. This wasn't HOA pettiness anymore. This was weaponizing the city against me. She couldn't win fairly, so she went behind the curtain and started pulling strings. And I knew she was sitting in her ivory kitchen, sipping Chardonnay, smirking, waiting for the fallout. The inspection happened 3 days later. Harold came in a white truck and took pictures of everything, my porch, my windows, even my mailbox. I stood there with my arms crossed, watching. He was polite, but distant. Like he already had his mind made up. At the end, he handed me a folded sheet. Pending review. You'll be notified of the outcome in 10 business days. I watched his truck drive off, and something inside me snapped. 10 days? I didn't have 10 days. Because while he was walking around with a clipboard, Karen had already started her next attack, and this time, she wasn't using letters or law. She was using people. It started small. The woman across the street, the one who always waved to Lily on our way to school, suddenly stopped. Wouldn't meet my eyes. Pretended not to hear me. Then our trash bins went missing. 2 days in a row. Then someone left a nasty little note in our mailbox, "Go back where you came from. This neighborhood isn't a daycare." And that one? That one hurt. Because they weren't just coming for me now, they were coming for my daughter. I sat at our kitchen table that night, the lights low, and looked at Lily drawing with crayons on the floor. She was singing again. Softly. Innocently. The same tune my mother used to hum. And all I could think was, what kind of place had I moved us into? What kind of monster targets a kid to win a war over wind chimes? But here's the thing about mothers. We bend. We break if we have to. But we don't back down. So I stopped waiting. No more reacting. No more hoping she'd get bored. I went on the offensive. I dug through every city record I could find. Pulled public blueprints, permits, inspection histories, and it took hours, but I found it. Karen's house? The fancy back patio she loved to flaunt during wine nights? Unpermitted. No paperwork. No city approval. No safety clearance. It was built years ago, before she became HOA president, and it had somehow slipped through the cracks. Until now. I printed the documentation, made copies, highlighted every violation in bold yellow, and dropped it all in a manila envelope. Then I walked to her front door, with the same calm smile she wore when she came after my chimes. She opened it, caught off guard, wearing a satin robe and holding a glass of something expensive. "Madison," she said slowly, tilting her head. "Can I help you?" I handed her the envelope. "Actually, yes. This is a formal complaint I've filed with the city. Regarding your patio. Looks like you forgot to get a permit." Her face changed in real time. Color drained. Jaw clenched. "You wouldn't." I stepped closer. "I just did." Then I leaned in, just enough for her to hear, but not enough for anyone else to claim drama. "You came after my family. My daughter. You crossed a line. I don't care how many board meetings you chair or neighbors you manipulate, you're not above the rules. And from now on? I'm watching." I turned and walked away. And for the first time? She didn't follow. That night, I sat on the porch again, wind chime swaying gently above my head. Lily sat beside me, her head resting on my arm. She didn't know the details. She didn't need to. She just knew her mom had stood up. Had fought back. And maybe, that was the real sound Karen couldn't stand. Not the chimes. Not the laughter. But the sound of someone unafraid. The city letter came 2 weeks later, not in a plain envelope, but a heavy-duty one, stamped with a seal. I tore it open right on the porch. Inside were 2 verdicts. One for me. One for Karen. Mine was short. No violations found. No fines to issue. Wind chime fixture considered decorative and non-disruptive under Code 17.3a. I exhaled, a long, shaky breath I didn't even know I was holding. But the second letter? That one was gold. Karen's patio had been red-flagged. Not just unpermitted, but unsafe. The inspector had marked it as non-compliant, structurally compromised, and a potential hazard. They gave her 30 days to tear it down, or face daily fines and possible legal action. I stood there in the sunlight, letter in hand, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. But Karen? She didn't go quietly. Oh no. She exploded. It was a Saturday morning when it happened. I was watering my front plants when I heard it. The sound of metal clanking, wood splintering, raised voices. I peeked over the hedges. Karen stood in her backyard, red in the face, yelling at two workers in neon vests who were disassembling her patio. "Do you have any idea who I am? I built this with my own hands." One of the workers shrugged. "Ma'am, we just follow the permits." She turned and saw me watching. For a second, she froze. Then she stormed toward the front yard like a tornado in heels. "You did this," she spat. "You think you've won? You think you can humiliate me in front of the whole street?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because that's when Mrs. Dupree stepped out of her house across the street. Now, Mrs. Dupree had lived in that neighborhood for 40 years. Everyone respected her. Everyone feared her judgment. "Karen," she said sharply. "Maybe it's time you stop blaming others for the mess you created." Karen blinked. Then Mr. Holtz came out next. The old war veteran. He looked Karen straight in the eyes and said, "I was a code inspector for 20 years. You should be grateful that patio didn't collapse with people on it." And then, one by one, other neighbors started stepping out. Not to side with Karen. To stand behind me. People I thought had turned against me. People who'd given me the cold shoulder. People who'd stayed silent during her little witch hunt. Turns out, they weren't on her side. They were scared. But when someone finally stood up to her, really stood up, they saw the cracks in her power. Karen looked around and realized, for the first time, she was alone. No more whisper campaigns. No more loyalty. Just her. And her crumbling patio. She didn't scream after that. She didn't say a word. She just turned, heels clicking against the concrete, and vanished into her house like a ghost retreating at sunrise. Later that evening, Mrs. Dupree came over with a tray of cookies. "You handled yourself with grace," she said, handing them over. "Most people would have lost their mind. But you? You held the line." I looked at the cookies, then back at her. "I didn't want a war." "No," she said gently. "But you didn't let her win one either." Then she added, before walking off, "That wind chime sounds like hope." Funny thing? The next day, I woke up to find 2 more wind chimes on nearby porches. Then another. Then another. By the end of the week, half the street was twinkling in the breeze. It was almost poetic. The very sound Karen tried to silence became the anthem of the neighborhood. Lily called it our song of freedom. I didn't correct her. She was right. But just when I thought the chapter was closed, something else happened. A letter arrived. Not from the city. From Karen. It was short. Sloppy handwriting. Just 5 sentences. "I've resigned from the HOA. I've sold the house. I leave next month. I'm sorry, not for the wind chimes, but for making your daughter afraid to sing." That was cruel. There was no return address. Just a forward stamp from a real estate firm. I sat on the porch for a long time with that letter in my hand. Not happy. Not smug. Just still. Because in the end, that's what bullies can't take. Not the revenge. Not the clapbacks. But the silence, the kind that comes when they're not the center anymore. A month later, the moving van showed up. No goodbye. No second apology. Karen just disappeared like she had arrived, suddenly, and with too much noise. I didn't watch her leave. Not because I didn't care. But because I was busy living. That day, Lily and I had a little backyard picnic. Just the 2 of us, her favorite blanket spread across the grass, a stack of peanut butter sandwiches between us, and the soft sound of our wind chime dancing above. She looked up at me, mouth sticky with jelly, and asked, "Mom, is the mean lady gone?" I paused. Then smiled. "She moved, honey. Somewhere far away. Lily looked thoughtful for a second. Then she said, I hope she finds something joyful. And just like that, in one sentence, my daughter taught me something I didn't know I still needed to learn. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It just means freeing yourself from carrying it anymore. That week, I baked cookies and brought them door to door. The same way Karen used to, except without the hidden cameras or the judgment. I laughed more. Slept better. And when I walked down the street, I didn't feel small or awkward or like I needed to apologize for simply being here. I felt seen. I felt home. And then, something beautiful happened. The HOA, now free of Karen's iron grip, voted unanimously to make wind chimes a permanent, protected fixture in our neighborhood bylaws. Symbol of expression, joy, and individuality, the new language read. Mr. Holt said it was the first time in 10 years that a rule was passed by unanimous vote. And they named it the Lily Clause. After my daughter. The one who sang. But here's the truth they don't always show you in those neighborhood dramas. It's not just about winning. It's about surviving without becoming what hurt you. I could have fought Karen with more noise, more anger, more revenge. But instead, I held my ground with truth. With grace. With a little steel underneath, sure. But never cruelty. And in the end, that's what made the difference. Karen had power. But I had people. And that made all the difference. One night, about a month later, Lily stood on the porch at sunset. She had a string in her hands, some shells, buttons, paper clips, and a little bell tied together. I made a chime, she said proudly. I smiled. Want to hang it next to mine? No, she said. This one's for you to take to work. To work? So you remember, even if someone is mean to you, you don't have to be mean back. I blinked fast, suddenly more emotional than I expected. I crouched and pulled her into a hug. I won't forget. She whispered in my ear, joy is louder than anger. You told me that. I had. And she remembered. So here's the thing about bullies, no matter how loud they are, no matter how many rules they make up, they can't take away your voice unless you hand it to them. Stand your ground. Stand with grace. And trust that the truth, even if it takes time, always finds its way home. Power isn't about control. It's about courage. Joy isn't a weakness. It's a rebellion. And sometimes, the quietest sound, a single chime in the wind, can echo louder than 1,000 angry voices. Because when you protect what matters with love instead of hate, you don't just win the fight. You change the game.